Last summer, I was approached to go and find out about climate change. They didn't want an expert. They wanted to see what someone like me, who didn't know much about it, would make of the whole thing. When I started, I didn't think climate change was a big deal, or at least I didn't think it was something that concerned me directly. I thought the jury was still out about it. And I thought hotter summers might not be such a bad thing anyway. I've always been a bit scornful of Greens and their policies. I always felt that they were holier-than-thou, bean-eating kind of people who wore interesting shoes and kind of wanted to spoil my fun.
Oh, hey! Get on the next plane and get out of here!
But now I've been to the places where it's happening. I've met those most affected by it and been shocked by how worried some very surprising people are.
It is very clear that we are seeing warning signs that we neglect at our peril.
For me, climate change is no longer a theory, it has become fact.
It's my belief that global warming is the biggest problem facing us this century, bigger even than the problems of global terrorism.
Is it as bad as that? I'm starting to think it is. We either ignore it, as the current American government is doing, and pretend it's not happening, in which case the bill is going to come due within my lifetime, most likely, and the Earth as we know it will change. Or we make decisions now about where we're going to be getting our energy from that are also going to change the way we live. And it's terrifying. My journey started in Alaska, the fastest warming place on the planet, and a warning to all of us of the dangers that will come. In the past 30 years, global temperatures have been increasing at an unprecedented rate. This summer, scientists working in the Arctic established that changes like this haven't happened since civilization first evolved.
What we're talking about is the greatest amount of change that human societies have had to deal with since the end of the last ice age.
The first person I met there was this man. Glenn Juday's been studying the impacts of global warming on the Arctic since the 1970s.
The middle range of climate warming scenarios would cause the Arctic ice pack to disappear at the end of the summer by about the end of the 21st century, so in about 100 years.
He told me that declassified military information has revealed that the thickness of the Arctic ice cap has already decreased by 40%.
If we just compare this year to last year, you can see the Arctic ice has shrunk to its historic lows. And the North Pole would not be a place you could stand. Temperatures this warm for a sustained period that we've had recently have not occurred for several centuries to probably several thousand years.
This summer, Alaska suffered the biggest forest fires in its history. Glenn took me out to see the damage.
The Earth has a climate system, and it's all connected, and it can switch.
He wanted me to understand that this was a sign that major changes were on our doorstep.
Fires have always occurred. The difference is, in a warming climate, there'll be a greater area burned. The time between fires will decrease, and when they burn, they'll burn more severely. They'll consume more of the plant material.
And we're seeing all of those things?
We've met that test, yes.
So my understanding of this science is a bit rudimentary, but it seems like warming is causing more fires.
Yes.
The trees get consumed by the fire, so as does the matter on the forest floor.
Right.
That in turn creates some kind of vicious circle where warming can lead to more warming.
Exactly.
Climate change started out as purely theoretical. It started out in the 1950s when scientists first noticed that there were changes in the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and that they were increasing year on year. What's so spooky about it is that it's moved from theory into reality, and that exactly the changes that scientists were expecting are beginning to take place.
This summer was the warmest summer in the 100-year record that we have in Alaska, and the temperature that we reached here was not projected in the scenario until 2058.
And when you talk to someone like Glenn Juday, you get a sense that this is a man who knows that there's a lot at stake and that climate change over the next 100 years could present a huge obstacle for humanity. I then went north into the Arctic Circle. Alaska's economy depends on the very oil that's destroying it. You see, the only way that scientists can explain global warming is through the massive increase of carbon dioxide that's being released as every day we burn tens of millions of barrels of oil, as well as coal and natural gas. Recent studies of ice cores have produced graphs that show that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has been pretty much the same for 400,000 years. But with industrialization 100 years ago, the line began to rise vertically. By the end of this century, carbon levels will have tripled again, forcing changes in the Earth's climate that we'll be powerless to stop. Like most of us, people here in Alaska don't want to know about the greenhouse effect. They want to drill more oil, not less. I've come to an Inupiat Eskimo village called Nuiqsut, on the edge of the biggest oil field in the northern hemisphere, on Alaska's north slope. The village's days are numbered, because there could be as much as 9 billion barrels of oil buried beneath these streets. I went there expecting to meet traditional hunter-gatherers, but it appears I'd come about 30 years too late. How has the climate changed around here?
When I was about small, used to be about 30 below, 40 below. We don't get that until maybe February nowadays.
Some people say it's to do with the oil industry. What do you think about that?
Not much. Hey, that's my cousin right there. Hey, I gotta go catch up with him. Okay?
You're gonna race off?
Yeah, I gotta catch a few more. See you later.
The attractions of modern life have proved hard to resist. It's said that Nuiqsuts receive more money from the oil companies than any other village on the north slope. They pay for the school bus and a brand new fire truck. And last year they built the village a baseball court in a hope that the Inupiat would agree to them exploring for oil here when the time comes. This is Clarence. Clarence is a caribou hunter and a mechanic. He's one of the few people in the village who's prepared to talk to me.
They like to keep us happy, give us some presents, what we don't know. So they gave us some presents like unexpected.
Do they give you any presents?
Yeah.
What do they give you?
Like anything, like meeting gloves, hat, and scarves.
Really?
Yes.
Do you have these things?
Yes.
Can you show me them?
I got this from the oil company, the scarf.
Is that from the oil company?
Yes.
No kidding.
Yeah, and my other hat is over here. I forgot why I put it. This one. And it's got A, and I mark it with.
Is that Alpine?
No, from the oil company at Prudhoe Bay.
Okay.
So I color with black marker.
Why?
Yeah, because when the sun sparks on the sky, and it reflects.
And is that bad?
It bothers the caribou.
Ah.
Yeah, it scares the caribou away.
So these are presents from the oil company?
Yes. Sometimes they mostly wanted more money from the oil companies. More money, because they love money.
Yeah.
They can't live without money these days. Because they love money just like a baby.
Why is your mum laughing?
She can't go without money.
She loves
like
money
me.
too. But do you love money?
Sometimes not.
Yeah. When did you see money first?
I see kamera manigmik.
1936 and 1950.
You saw money first time in 1950?
Yeah,
Do you, what was it? What note? Did you see a note or a coin or what?
Oh, $1 silver one.
The silver dollar, yeah.
Yeah.
Clarence is an anomaly. He's like stuck out here, you know, on one side of his house. There's people digging millions of barrels of oil out of the earth.
The oil company changes our subsistence way of life.
On the other hand, he's a hunter who's doing seasonal hunting, trapping caribou, fishing, catching wolverine, like his forefathers probably did for millennia.
We used to hunt caribous nearby the village, and now we don't anymore.
The Inupiaq, from managing pretty well to hold on to the remnants of their traditional subsistence lifestyle, are now faced with a much starker choice. Which do we want more? Do we want snowmobiles, money, four-wheel drive vehicles, or do we want to carry on hunting caribou? And it's pretty clear they can't do both. They've got to choose between more development, the money that it's going to bring, you know, the higher standard of living that that's going to bring, and at the same time as they choose that, that means kissing goodbye to a lot of the natural processes that underlay the lives that they used to have. You see the evidence of climate change in tiny ways.
Oh,
What?
there's water.
Is there? Global warming is having the same effect on us. You know, it's as we embrace technology, as the Industrial Revolution, you know, occurred from the mid-19th century onwards, it transformed our lives, and now it turns out it was transforming the planet as well. Dealing with the cause of it would mean recognizing that all the things that we've grown up to value, having lots of stuff, having cars, owning things to be happy, being wealthy, you know, what fundamentally makes us modern people is also what's threatening the future of the planet. You know, that's a big realization. You might be disappointed to hear that climate change doesn't mean that the weather gets simply warmer. What it really means is a future of droughts, hurricanes and floods. Since the 1970s, extreme weather events have multiplied all over the planet. I've come to Germany to see the people who are picking up the tab.
Hello.
Hello.
Dr. Bertz will see you now.
These are the offices of Munich Re, one of the world's biggest insurance companies. In the whole of the 80s, the insurance industry paid out $27 billion on disasters like hurricanes, droughts and floods. Natural catastrophes are now their biggest cost. In the past 20 years, their payouts have increased by 500%. Munich Re believes this will continue. In 1997, they issued a report saying that the financial costs of climate change could bankrupt the world economy within our children's lifetimes.
For me, climate change is no longer a theory, it has become fact.
I'd come to meet Gerhard Betz, the author of that report.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
On the day we met, Florida was being ripped apart by the third hurricane to have hit it that month.
Everybody's off the street now. The police officers have been pulled off. There's one of the gusts.
What kind of year has this been, 2004 been?
2004 will be the year with the highest economic losses in this decade, and it will be the most costliest year for the insurance industry ever. I really think that the last 3 years made it clear to everybody that we no longer can consider these events random events. It was in 2002 the Europe floods, which were, according to the statistics, a 400 to 500 year event. It was the heat wave in 2003, another 400 to 500 year event.
Something like 35,000 people died.
This was the worst disaster ever in Europe, at least for many centuries. In 2004, the hurricanes, which were really extraordinary. And so altogether, if you add another few events in the 90s, the winter storms, which we had in Europe, and many other events, it is no longer a theory, it is reality.
But so that means that making your decisions about reinsuring people for the future, you're thinking now more seriously about the possibility of unusual weather patterns occurring?
Absolutely true. The likelihood of such extreme weather events has already dramatically increased, and it will further increase, in my opinion.
It's not just the insurance companies that are warning us about the dangers that global warming represents. I managed to get a meeting with one of the biggest companies in the industry that is being most blamed for climate change.
It is very clear that we are seeing warning signs that we neglect at our peril.
This is Lord Oxborough, chairman of Shell.
We are going to see probably a world in which calamities, famines, great loss of life, big storms, much more common. And I think as global citizens, we need to do something about this.
I can't believe he just said that. So what do we do?
Well, you want to look at power generation. Electricity generation accounts for a great deal of global pollution. You can actually separate out the CO2 from the hydrocarbon, and what you actually burn is hydrogen in your power station. Now, this breeds on to the next question, what do you do with the CO2? You don't pump that out into the atmosphere, you then dispose of it in some way. You might take CO2 and pump it underground into reservoirs which have been depleted of oil and gas in the past. Both of those are serious possibilities.
Pumping carbon underground?
Yes.
Into sort of reservoirs of carbon?
This is where it came from.
Isn't carbon sequestration just a get-out clause to allow oil producers and consumers to sleep sounder at night? And
I think that the most important thing that we can do is actually persuade everyone, and I do mean everyone, that this is a global problem that we have to take seriously, and that we're fighting a war here. And if I'm critical of the UK government, it is that there has been relatively little support for research. It was not sensible to expect industry simply to pick this up.
Well, why not? But you make tons of money from, you've made over the Shell over its...
Can we cut that out?
Sorry, OK, you don't be Chris.
Despite the fact that he's the chairman of one of the biggest oil companies in the world, I believe Ron Oxborough was genuine in his concerns.
Okay. Well,
but I got the impression that the company's PRs wished that he'd shut up.
OK, but I mean, that's not going to make people... I've said this outside here. That's not going to make people too unhappy, I don't think.
If global warming is serious enough to persuade the chairman of an oil company that we need to do something about it, surely it's time for the rest of us to wake up. My journey now turned into a search for solutions to discover what on earth we can do. Mum, it's Marcel. Well, listen, I'm calling you from a solar-powered phone. Well, we're making this thing about global warming. The Centre of Alternative Technology, or CAT as it's known, started out in the 70s as an experiment in sustainable living. But now it's become a theme park for wannabe Greens. Some kind of dark hole. Well, what about in through here? Oh my God, there's a shark coming through the wall. Hiya, I'm Marcel, you must be Amanda.
Hi, Marcel.
Nice to meet you. How you doing?
Nice to meet you too. You're here to work out your carbon footprint.
That's right. The first stage of my green over was to find out how much carbon dioxide I'm personally producing.
What we're going to do is take you through a series of questions.
Okay.
They're all multiple choice. You need to click the most appropriate answer, and at the end we'll see how you're doing and what you can do better on. So.
Do you want to read the questions?
And do you shower or share your bath water?
No.
Now, how do you heat the water? Is that gas too?
Gas as well.
Right.
Is that bad, gas?
Gas is better than oil or coal, but it's not as good as green electricity.
Do you have solar water heating? No.
Nope.
What kind of fridge do you have? I have quite a small fridge.
OK, that would be the standard then.
I think it's smaller than standard. Can I have a bit more carbon food?
How many flights have you made within the UK this year?
Within the UK?
Yes.
None.
How about flights within Europe?
Well, so far, but I have been making a documentary, but I have made 4.
Yeah, is that something? Would normally most years you'd be making a documentary that might involve flights?
No, but I'm willing to take my lumps.
OK. What about as far as America or India?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. Well, quite a few, yeah, more than that actually. But 4.
Well, 4's the maximum option, so go with that. As far as the Far East or Australia?
What? Oh. Far East. Well, I've been to Sri Lanka.
And now it's going to calculate our footprint.
In order to bring global warming under control, everyone on the planet needs to produce less than 2.5 tonnes of carbon per year.
Obviously, if you're travelling to promote people to the consequences of carbon dioxide.
Oh, shit.
Surprised?
I'd already clocked up 35.
Let's see what would happen if you didn't have the washing machine.
No, I've got to have a washing machine.
If you used a laundrette instead, or you shared one.
Made from this country. I don't like spending. Only
occasionally. If you were to start sharing your flat with more people,
yeah,
that would probably have quite a big difference.
Okay, like how?
Because you'd be sharing the electricity with other people.
Well, I've only got 1 bedroom, so whoever is going to have to like me quite a lot.
You're there.
So all I have to do is get someone who's prepared to live with me, never travel abroad, get rid of my washing machine. No, I kept my washing machine. Cook all my food, all my meals myself, insulate, switch over my heating to green electric, and go everywhere by bicycle or bus occasionally. And I'm within the target.
How realistic do you think that is?
Not very realistic, really. The wind technology first pioneered at CAT has now become official government policy. Britain is now attempting the fastest expansion in renewable energy anywhere in the world. But wherever the turbines have gone, locals have opposed them, as the great British public unites to assert the great British lament, "Not in my backyard."
That's 4. That's Radio 4. And you can hear the strobing going through it. And that interference coincides with the turning of the blades.
I've ploughed this and I've reclaimed it from gorse. I've sweated blood and tears here for the last 30 years. And if this is the alternative to agriculture, God help us.
From where I'm coming from, I've been talking to scientists, they've been making these dire predictions about global warming, that the planet's heating up. There's scenarios where if we don't do something about carbon emissions, by the end of this century, we're going to reach a place where we're in irreversible climate change and do things to our planet that are unprecedented.
Right.
So it's emergency time. We have to start thinking of...
Oh, is it as bad as that?
Well, yeah, if you believe the scientists.
Yeah, is it as bad as that?
I'm starting to think it is.
Right. Would you have one in your back garden?
I don't have a back garden, so...
That's not answering the question.
Would I have one in my back garden? I guess I probably would. I guess I probably would.
Yeah. Well, which one do you want?
The locals hate the way the turbines look and sound. But even without their resistance, it'll take decades before wind power and other renewables can meet more than 20% of our energy needs. The Greens say that renewable technology is the answer, but I'm beginning to wonder whether we can afford to wait for it to come of age. The only environmentalist I met who acknowledged the reality of the situation was this man, James Lovelock. whose theory of the planet as a single organism, called Gaia, revolutionised the Earth sciences and made him a guru for the Greens.
The sea level is going to rise, if we don't do something about it, almost certainly to anywhere between 7 and 14 metres, and this will take out nearly all the major cities of the world. There will be refugee problems on a scale that we've never ever seen before. The total death toll could reach 1 billion. And it's the hugest disaster that's ever confronted our species.
What about new sources of energy or using renewable resources?
There's all sorts of nice ideas which would be fine if we had 50 years or 100 years, like sequestering the carbon dioxide as it comes out of the chimneys, building tidal schemes, using wind power properly in the places where it would be suitable. Things like that, but we don't have time. And the only energy scheme that I know of that is immediately or almost immediately available and could provide large amounts of energy quickly without doing anything to the greenhouse is nuclear.
Would you advocate that as a real alternative?
It's not so much an alternative, it's a bandage, it's a therapy. Radiation therapy, if you like. We're in a hell of a mess, and the only way out is to use nuclear power.
When I was a teenager, I was in favour of CND, and at that time it seemed to me that being in favour of nuclear power was a bit like being in favour of nuclear war. To me, nuclear technology is the opposite of environmentally friendly. It produces this byproduct which remains radioactive for 250,000 years. It's got potentially devastating impact on the environment, and yet produces no carbon emissions. You know, when the first time that was explained to me, I almost did a double take.
People have just got to realise there is just no question. Nuclear accidents will happen, but they're trivial compared with what's going to happen. It's like comparing a few car accidents with a war.
So you admit that nuclear power is not safe, that accidents happen, that radiation leaks, that leukemias, cancers will occur?
Sure, I admit all that, but it's still trivial compared with the dangers that we face from the global greenhouse, and I don't see any simple answer to providing power without aggravating the greenhouse except by nuclear. I look at it as a medicine that's got a slight side effect. You have to take it.
Lovelock said that however bad the collateral damage from nuclear power, it's negligible compared to what's going to happen if climate change continues. So it made sense to go to the place that's synonymous in people's mind with the worst nuclear accident. I had to go to Chernobyl. I mean,
what does it say? That's high, isn't it? Oh, yeah, it's off the scale.
This is reactor number 4 in Chernobyl, site of the worst nuclear accident in history.
It's contaminated. Here. Yes.
I've come here to explore whether the answer to global warming might mean we have to return to this. Nuclear power.
Are you in favour of nuclear power?
When the reactor exploded, 100 Hiroshimas worth of radiation were released into the atmosphere.
40,000. I'm hungry.
Am I hungry?
Yeah.
No, are you?
I start to feel myself hungry.
Are you kidding? That's the last thing I'm thinking about.
18 years later, it's still emitting radiation from behind this concrete shell.
It was at 200 when I started walking across that field.
Yes.
And it's 205
yes.
now.
Yes. So that is why a lot of...
That's why this is a bad place to stand.
Where you are, exactly, in what place?
They call it the sarcophagus, and I'm about to go inside.
Yeah, what do they do? What do the workers here do?
Невозможно. Это надо смотреть подряд.
Сколько? 200-300 в день. The guy's saying there's 200 or 300 workers in here every day because looking after the reactor is still a full-time job, even though it's a ruin.
Chernobyl made nuclear power unacceptable across the Western world.
So yeah, this is a bad place.
разрешено для того, чтобы понизить дозу для персонала, который здесь проходит.
There's a protection there so that it reduces the dose for people who walk past. You could feel it. There's a lot coming through that lead barrier nonetheless. So have we had the maximum dose yet?
No, minimum.
So where's the dangerous bit? So if this isn't the dangerous bit... It's looking nice. It's going to come up nice peachy colour. Let's get Carol Smiley in here.
So, at the moment, we are coming.
This is it, control room of reactor number 4.
Yes, exactly.
This is where the accident happened.
Yes.
This is where the guys were...
Yes.
Okay, let's have a look. Where's the button that they were pressing?
Possibly over there. For many years, I don't remember exactly.
Can you imagine what they were feeling when they pressed the button and realised the reactor had gone into meltdown?
Yeah.
It was April 26th, 1986, very, very early in the morning, about 1:30, and they were doing a test to see how the reactor would perform under low power. They were trying to practice switching to the diesel generator that worked the cooling system when there was low power to the reactor, and they made a mistake, and the reactor basically boiled dry, blew up, and released tons and tons of radioactive material into the sky, which then subsequently blew over Western Europe. And traces of radiation showed up in California and Tokyo. That's how far it spread.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about it?
I was in India and I heard it on the BBC World Service. And I've always felt slightly smug that I wasn't in Western Europe at the time of the accident. But I suppose any benefit that I got from being out of the path of the fallout, I've now wiped away by actually visiting the reactor itself. And I've gone up from 188 to 211.
The disaster also illustrates the other danger of nuclear power, that governments can't be trusted with it. The Soviet authorities waited 36 hours before evacuating people, and even longer to tell the world. An area covering 1,600 square miles is still contaminated with radioactivity. They call it the exclusion zone, and this is the heart of it. Pripyat was a model Soviet town. 45,000 people lived here when the accident happened. They will never return.
It's a very, very weird place. It's sort of like a nuclear Pompeii. And you can imagine there's so much here that would be very useful for historians of communism in centuries to come. They could turn up here and dig up books and artifacts that belong to the people who lived here. This place looks like the end of civilization. It's a place frozen in time, April 26th, 1986. And since then it's just decayed, really. Human beings haven't been part of the landscape properly for 18 years. It's not a big stretch of the imagination to think that this is what the world's going to look like when there's no human beings in it at all. This tree is actually growing out of the floor of what used to be the Pripyat volleyball gymnasium. And I guess this tree symbolises the fact that it's not nature that needs defending, it's us.
I went to the old football stadium with Andrei Arkhipov, the scientist who'd taken me into the sarcophagus. He spent as much time as anyone in the zone, studying the effects of radiation on plants and animals, and then on himself.
How has radiation affected your health?
Of course, radiation create additional risk for my life. Exactly. It's not a question. So I have additional risk for any illness. But is this risk will realized in me or not, I don't know. Nobody knows.
Andrei has no illusions about the risks of nuclear power, but still he believes it's no more dangerous than many of the everyday technologies of modern life.
But how many people died because of Chernobyl?
100,000.
You think maybe 100,000 additional deaths?
For instance, 100,000 additional deaths in the Soviet Union.
From cancers and...
From Chernobyl, because of Chernobyl.
100,000 sounds like a lot, but that's a
lot, not a lot. Do you know how many people killed every year in the world by car accident?
No idea.
I think much more higher.
You know, people want to have safe solutions. People want to be safe.
Okay, very well. Please, don't produce any other energy. No energy.
Why?
To be safe. Because I can explain very quickly. All of type of energy producing create some risk. Risk of empty of natural resources, risk of radionuclides released from nuclear power plant, risk of water ecological changes in the case of hydrological electricity. So all of us create risk. In this case, to be safe, forget about everything.
He's saying progress is painful and there's nothing that has no risk. He's right.
Are you ready for this?
No.
People call this progress. Progress. So otherwise our society go to progress, as they forget about this and be safe.
Andrei and James Lovelock were saying the same thing. Nuclear power is dangerous, but we can't avoid danger in modern life. I'm beginning to think that nuclear is the least worst option. Here in Britain, that puts me in the lunatic fringe. Since Chernobyl, the Greens have won the argument and Britain's nuclear industry will soon be a thing of the past. But can we afford to follow the green option when nuclear is the only realistic carbon-free alternative on the table? Hi, Tony.
Hi.
Marcel.
Good to meet you, Marcel.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
I wanted to see whether Tony Juniper, the director of Friends of the Earth, would change his stance. How long have we got?
How long do you need?
No, I'm talking about the planet, not my
internet. Well, it depends which way you look at the science, and increasingly it seems, with a growing confidence and more data, that in the next 20 years we could be approaching points of no return, possibly even shorter term than that.
So we've got to cut carbon emissions now?
We have to cut carbon emissions now, and it's all very well to set long-term targets, as we've done in the United Kingdom. We've said 60% reductions in carbon emissions by 2050. At Friends of the Earth, we welcome that. But if we're going to bring about the changes needed, we can't wait until 2049, then do a big switch. We've got to start making the cuts now.
We haven't mentioned the N word yet. The nuclear.
The nuclear word. Yes, and this obviously for Friends of the Earth has been a very long-running discussion, and since we've been going for 35 years, we've been very sceptical about the role for nuclear power, and it's not because we're against it in principle.
But isn't that slightly disingenuous? I mean, I feel like coming to Friends of the Earth and talking about the potential uses of nuclear power is a bit like going to the Vatican to discuss birth control, because it's in the nature of the Friends of the Earth to be against it.
But not because we're against it because we're against it. We're against it because history shows it's hugely expensive. History shows that it pollutes the environment with very toxic and dangerous substances. So I think there is a different way of going with the flow of human nature and going with a different kind of proposition that could very much work with people's basic drives in terms of wanting security, a decent livelihood, a good quality of life. All of those things are possible at the same time as massively bringing down carbon dioxide emissions.
But it just seems to me that changing the values of society, that seems the longest and most thankless. It's a kind of evangelical task.
In some ways, But it can be done in a way which I think, you know, it's not about sacrifice. It's about a very positive set of outcomes.
But it is about sacrifice, isn't it? It's about
it's
about saying, you know what, we'll do with a bit less. I don't have your faith that human nature is so perfectible that people are going to be able to say, you know what, this new car isn't making me happy after all. I think I'd rather do Tai Chi in the park. And, you know, I mean, it just seems like our whole worldview is set up. We encourage people to consume. That's where we think the good life lies.
Yes, we do right now, and that's one of the things that we have to change. Just on this question of...
While Tony Juniper and the Greens dream of us learning to change our ways, the developing world is switching over to the very same carbon-intensive consumerism that the Greens want us to reject. So I boarded yet another plane. My carbon footprint must now be over 50 tons. I've come to have a look at the fastest growing economy on the planet. Over 1 billion Indians are set to triple their carbon emissions in 20 years' time. When I arrived in the Bay of Bengal, I had no inkling that within a couple of months this part of the world would be hit by a tsunami that would claim over 150,000 lives. The tidal wave shows how vulnerable these coasts are. West Bengal, where I was spared the carnage, but the people here face a natural catastrophe that we can control from global warming. 150 million of them could become refugees if the sea levels continue to rise. The process has already started, and villages are disappearing into the sea. Were these houses?
Two villages have gone underwater.
And these were both villages here?
8 kilometers দূরত্ব গ্রামটা ছিল. The village extended for about 8 kilometers.
8 kilometers that way? When did they disappear?
না না ভাঙনটা চলছে 15 বছরের মতো এই 5 বছরে বেশি গ্রামটা চলে গেছে.
It's been continuing for 15 years, but for the last 5 years it has been a lot.
It's been getting faster in the last 5 years. And what's going to happen when these go?
এইভাবে চলছে তো 20 বছর ধরে এরপরে মানুষ মানে দিতে দিতে তার মানে কি বল দেয়ালে ফিট থেকে গেছে আর রাস্তা নেই রাস্তার উপরে যে সমস্ত ঘর দেখে আসছেন না এইভাবে সমুদ্রে সমস্ত বিলীন হয়ে গেছে.
I think that's the way it's been continuing and will continue. Finally we'll end up with our backs to the wall and then there's nothing else to progress, nothing else to do. We just stand and wait for death.
Topon, is that an old paddy field?
He's saying there were houses and paddy fields.
These were houses. Where are the houses? I can't see the houses.
They are gone. These were all houses.
So, did you have a house, Topon? Was your house here?
আমার বাড়ি 3 বার ভেঙে তারপর আবার 4 বারে পড়ে পড়েছে.
He's saying his house has gone 3 times. It's receded 3 times.
Can you point to one of you? Where's your house?
আমারও 4 বার বাড়ি নাড়তে হয়েছে এবং 25 বিঘা জায়গা সব চলে গেছে.
He's saying that Marcel, he's saying his houses have been destroyed 4 times.
For me, the village was the most amazing thing I saw. You know, they're stuffed, and they said, well, our backs are against the wall. And there was something kind of noble and hopeless about the way they got to keep moving every year, building a new flood defence. That village in the Sundarbans that's sinking under the sea is the reality of climate change, and it's a fraction of what's happening, and it's a tiny fraction of what's going to happen as sea levels rise. Thousands of people from the Sundarbans have moved to Calcutta, a city of 15 million people. But even this is only a temporary escape. Calcutta itself could be underwater in the course of their children's lifetimes. If Calcutta goes, so do the other coastal cities of India and most of Bangladesh. We're talking about 150 million people on the move, looking for a place to live in the most overcrowded region of the planet. The billions who live in the developing world are caught in a vicious circle. Because they're poor, they can't protect themselves against the extremes of climate change. But the harder they work to drag themselves out of poverty, the more certain they are of bringing about their own destruction. The economy here is expanding at an almost unbelievable rate. At present, an average American produces 20 times as much carbon as an average Indian, but all that is set to change. Calcutta, which is to us is a byword of biblical destitution, and which you still see, and it's still terrible. But at the same time, now there's this totally new society rising out of it, which is yuppies, which is middle-class people who want to have stuff.
This is my microwave oven. I've just purchased it 2 years back. There's a small little mini fridge which I've got. This is my music system. It's a Panasonic music system. And this is my television. It's an LG television too. And that is about it. This is my little room and my little family.
This is Sumit, part of India's booming middle class.
These are the ways I train my people.
Okay.
See, when you join a call center, the best thing about it is something called the voice and accent.
Sumit makes his money training people to get jobs in Calcutta's new call centres.
So these are the 7 points on which I groom them on how to have a presentable voice.
How many people get in touch with you for this?
In a month, I have around 15 to 20 candidates. Nowadays, people are not going for any other jobs except call center jobs. The moment they pass out schools and colleges, they want jobs in call centers.
And they end up then with a good standard of living?
Yes, of course. Say, I give you an example. Sometimes I get this couple, they are just newly married. They're not getting good jobs. They're just getting normal marketing jobs or normal, secretarial jobs, receptionist jobs where they're earning very low amounts. I give them jobs in call centers where the husband is earning 10 to 12,000 every month, the wife is earning, and they have a good standard of living. They can buy a house also with installments. They can buy a car. I mean, it's infinity. They can just go beyond whatever their dreams are.
Next year, Sumit's going to buy his first car.
Big car?
Okay, big Hyundai.
Yeah.
The terrifying thing is, 50 million other Indians will soon follow suit.
I don't know.
What about this rickshaw? Why don't we take that?
Which one?
The guy, the bicycle guy.
You want to go on the rickshaw?
Well, I don't know. Why not?
I don't want to sit on the rickshaw.
You won't sit on the rickshaw?
You want to sit with me?
Well, yeah, I don't mind. Okay. Before we left, Sumit took us to meet the boss of one of the call centres, where the UK shift was just starting up.
You're calling BT and BT's charging you 113 pence a minute. But we are charging you only 64 pence.
This is going to sound like a weird question, but how many cars do you drive? How many cars do you have, personally?
I have 4.
A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Todd. This is Rebecca Jones, and I'm here on behalf of
So for your future interaction with our company, would be needing a password, okay?
Do you think the Indian economy will continue to grow?
You're talking about 1 billion people ready to work, and ready to work seriously, and educated people at that.
India and China are going through a period of unprecedented economic growth. If this is powered through fossil fuels, you can kiss any idea of controlling global warming goodbye. It's coming here and seeing a country that's changed so much in the last 18 years, and people who are so hopeful about the future. It's not a majority of the people, but some people are getting chances that they would never have had before. And what they need to go further, to carry on what they've started, is energy. They need power, and they're going to have to get it from somewhere. And me, personally, I think safe nuclear power is probably the way forward. I don't say that without any misgivings. What else is on the table? What are we going to... Turbines? Hydroelectric? Solar power? Maybe. That would be great. But how long do we have? Having done the journey, it seems the Greens were right all along about climate change. But having identified the problem, they don't want to recognise the solution. Climate change really shakes up the way you look at the world, and you can see that when you meet someone like Ron Oxborough, who's the head of Shell, who's peddling fossil fuels, who's now turning around saying, we've got to get off these fossil fuels, they're terrible for us. And that you've got someone like me who came to this problem really not seeing that it was a problem, coming reluctantly to the view that nuclear power probably is the solution. Nuclear weapons were the original weapons of mass destruction. Well, I found the weapons of mass destruction, and they're things that produce carbon. They're things in our own homes. They're cars, they're TVs, they're microwaves, they're kettles, they're blenders. It's the stuff that Sumit and 2 billion other people around the world are about to get. All those things have an impact on the planet. Tiny individually, but altogether the impact is enormous. And in a way the choice is quite simple. Either we switch them off or we get nuclear power stations in our back gardens. But which politician wants to tell you that?